Coming up, President Yoon will be meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. A lot to talk about for the two leaders as attempts are being made to improve the cold bilateral relations. Seoul's presidential office also confirms a meeting on the sidelines with US President Biden. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping met for their first face-to-face talks since the start of the conflict in Ukraine on Thursday. The two show support for each other's efforts in competing with the West. The risk of a global recession in 2023 rises as countries raise interest rates. That's according to the World Bank, which added that just a moderate hit to the global economy could tip the world into a recession.
Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. More details have been announced on South Korean President Yoon's upcoming overseas trip to the UK, US and Canada.
President Yoon will sit down for talks with his Japanese counterpart next week on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, and he will also have a one-on-one with US President Joe Biden. Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
President Yoon will meet separately with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Kishida, next week in New York on the sidelines of the 77th United Nations General Assembly.
We have agreed to hold bilateral summits with the United States and Japan. We are currently in the process of finalizing the times.
The Yoon-Kishida meeting will mark the first summit between the two countries in 2 years and 9 months. Although the agenda has not been set, Seoul's presidential office said both sides have gladly agreed to meet. This bilateral will be watched closely by many as the neighbors have been locked in an extensive row over disputes stemming from Japan's 1910 to 1945 colonial rule of the Korean Peninsula. As for the Yoon-Biden talks, the two leaders could discuss in detail about follow-ups to their May summit, sitting down one-on-one again in just 4 months' time. President Yoon's first UN address will focus on expanding South Korea's role on the global stage by proposing to tackle together the pandemic, climate change, supply chain disruptions, as well as digital and cultural divides. He'll also hammer home the importance of global solidarity in deterring war and nuclear threats.
The Yoon administration's 5-year diplomatic vision demonstrates that we continue to expand freedom, maintain a consistent and predictable foreign policy line by working with the international community, and foster peace and prosperity together with like-minded global partners.
After addressing the 193-member assembly, Yoon will also meet with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for talks on North Korea. A busy week awaits the South Korean president as he embarks on a 7-day, 5-night, 3-nation tour this Sunday, which will first take him to London to attend the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, as well as Canada, for a summit with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Scholars, diplomats and officials from around the world are attending the annual Jeju Forum. This year's theme, Beyond Conflict Towards Peace, Coexistence and Cooperation, and topping the agenda are Seoul-Tokyo ties. Experts express the need for the two sides to cooperate and move forward together. Our Kim Da-mi reports.
Time for the so-called plus diplomacy to unlace the much entangled South Korea-Japan relations. At the 17th annual Jeju Forum on Thursday, experts from both Seoul and Tokyo agreed that the two countries need to find ways to cooperate and prosper together, especially when the current strategic environment is providing enough room for bilateral cooperation. They also agreed that the Yoon administration's reaching out to Japan meets South Korea's national dignity, such as its launch of the Joint Consultative Body to resolve dispute over Japan's wartime forced labor. But according to one of the participants of the South Korean task force, Tokyo also needs to come forward.
The Japanese side needs to understand that the historical dispute is not only South Korea's, but an issue that Japan also needs to cooperate on.
Ironing out the prolonged conflict has become much more complex, with a growing awareness of the issue among people in Japan. This is why experts stress leaders of the two countries need to convince their people of the complexity of the historical dispute and step up their efforts to move forward. One hopeful way is the summit between the leaders of South Korea and Japan next week.
The summit will naturally lead to an improvement of bilateral ties. Kishida's actual comments on what Japan has done to improve the relations will also help improve things.
In the meantime, active cultural, human-to-human exchanges are a must, especially among the younger generations who can look at history more objectively and enjoy and appreciate each other's cultures. A number of experts said now could be the right time for Japan to engage as the Yoon administration pursues a broader foreign policy under the vision of South Korea as a global pivotal state, an approach that aligns with Japan's strategy of free and open Indo-Pacific. 김다미, Arirang News, Jeju.
Chinese President Xi Jinping, who left China for the first time in more than 2 years to travel to Central Asia this week, sat down with his Russian counterpart. In their first face-to-face talks since the start of the conflict in Ukraine, the two leaders held their strategic ties in defiance of the West. Kim Yo-sun has more.
The long-anticipated summit between the leaders of China and Russia took place in Uzbekistan on Thursday on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's summit. The meeting began with Russian President Vladimir Putin's opening statement, during which he told his Chinese counterpart that he understands his questions and concerns about the ongoing Ukraine war. He also hailed the close ties between the two countries.
The foreign policy tandem between Moscow and Beijing plays a key role in ensuring global and regional stability. We jointly advocate the formation of a just, democratic and multipolar world order based on international law and the central role of the UN.
He also thanked Beijing for having a balanced position in connection with the Ukraine crisis before moving on to condemn the, quote, Western provocation in the Taiwan Strait. Calling Putin his old friend, Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed the role of the two countries in bringing stability to the global order.
China and Russia have maintained effective strategic communication. In the face of changes in the world, times and history, China is willing to work with Russia to demonstrate the responsibility of a major country, play a leading role, and inject stability into a turbulent world.
The last time the two met in person was in February, when both leaders promised that the relationship between Russia and China would be, quote, without limits. The White House expressed concerns over the latest meeting between the leaders of Russia and China in a briefing Thursday. During an interview with CNN, White House spokesman John Kirby stressed that the whole world, including China, should align against what Putin is doing. He added that this is not the time for any kind of business as usual with the Russian leader. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The Speaker of Chinese Legislature arrived in Seoul. On Friday, Lee Chang-soo will be sitting down for talks with President Yoon and also with the National Assembly Speaker. Likely topics include bilateral cooperation and issues surrounding the US missile defense system THAAD. Lee Kyung-eun provides a glimpse of what to expect.
Wrapping up a tour in Russia, Mongolia, and Nepal, the next stop for Lee Chang-soo as the head of China's legislature, South Korea. It's the first visit to Seoul by a Chinese parliamentary speaker in 7 years. During his 3-day visit, China's third highest official will meet South Korea's National Assembly Speaker Kim Jin-pyo and President Yoon Suk-yeol and discuss cooperation on areas of mutual interest. This May, President Yoon's inauguration was attended by Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan, President Xi's right-hand man, in a rare move by Beijing sending such a high-ranking official. Observers say Beijing is trying to boost bilateral ties at a critical time for China.
All of the countries Lee's visiting have strategic value for China. Seoul, in particular, could see this as China's attempt to counter Washington amid the intensifying Beijing-Washington rivalry.
On the table in this week's talks could be South Korea's participation in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework and its potential joining of the Semiconductor Alliance Chief 4, both of which are led by the U.S. aimed at countering Beijing. Also, the U.S. anti-missile defense system THAAD, a unit of which the Yoon government is pushing to have operational at a base in Seongju. China has been claiming that South Korea committed previously to limit its operation and not deploy more THAAD units. Eyes are also on China's potential message for North Korea, which recently passed a law of using a preemptive nuclear strike in case of an imminent threat to its leader. And whether Lee Chan-shu's visit could lead to a staged summit between President Yoon and President Xi. Lee Young-eun, Arirang News.
The World Bank has warned of a possible devastating recession next year if policymakers continue to raise interest rates too high and put pressure on financial markets. Citing its latest study, the Washington-based organization said Thursday the world's three largest economies, namely the U.S., China, and the Eurozone region, have been slowing sharply. It added that a moderate hit to the global economy could tip it into a recession. It also called on leading central banks to coordinate their moves in order to alleviate the overall amount of tightening and urged governments to provide targeted relief to vulnerable households instead. The United States has hit more Russian individuals and companies with sanctions over the war in Ukraine. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control on Thursday sanctioned 22 individuals and 2 entities, including the heads of some of Russia's key financial institutions like the national payment card system. These individuals were accused of helping Russia evade prior international sanctions. Others included on the list were found to have committed human rights crimes, such as deporting Ukrainian children to Russia or were participating in combat in Ukraine. Treasury Secretary Janet L. Yellen said the U.S. will continue with strong actions to hold Russia accountable for its war crimes and keep Putin financially isolated. The group of 7 major economies have agreed to take a tougher, more coordinated stance on trade with China. Following a 2-day meeting with G7 officials in Brandenburg, Germany's economy minister Robert Habeck told reporters on Thursday that China should no longer be able to freely engage in trade when it doesn't even consider social and humanitarian standards. He added that Germany will persuade the EU to also implement stronger trade policies against China. And while G7 trade ministers released a joint statement on the matter, China was not named specifically. Instead, the statement expressed concerns about unfair trade practices such as forced technology transfer and intellectual property theft. The Korean won continues to dip against the U.S. dollar. This comes amid record high inflation and other external risks. Authorities warn against hard behavior and emphasizing appropriate measures will be taken to stem excessive depreciation. Lee Ji-yoon helps us look beyond the digits.
On Thursday, the Korean won ended at 1,393.71 against the greenback. The won has been losing ground dramatically against the U.S. dollar, as the latest inflation numbers in the U.S. suggest more outsized rate hikes by the Federal Reserve. And with growing fears of a global recession, South Korea's foreign exchange authorities on Thursday said they are closely monitoring the currency market as volatility increases in the local currency. South Korea's Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho also addressed similar concerns.
We're closely monitoring herd behavior in the foreign exchange market and will take appropriate measures to stabilize the market if necessary.
However, the minister said there's no need for excessive anxiety.
Although the won is sharply depreciating against the U.S. dollar, there's no need for excessive anxiety over this because we have been consulting with foreign experts while keeping a close eye on external indicators.
Many analysts have been urging the authorities to actively intervene, saying the Korean currency has already slid to a level that would do more harm than good to the South Korean economy. And the heightened uncertainty has fueled concerns over whether the country holds an amount of foreign currency reserves sufficient to cover short-term foreign debt. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. We're less than a month away from the Korean baseball organization's postseason, with the excitement of the playoffs able to look forward to.
It's also been an interesting regular season with the champions to be decided in the next few weeks. For more on the regular season run-in and beyond, Dan Kurtz, the founder of MyKBO, joins us from Olympia, Washington. A good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Good morning to you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And well, first, let's talk about the potential regular season champions with both the Landers and the Twins in contention. Of course, the Landers are winning, but do you think the Twins can turn things around at this point?
I personally believe LG has a shot. Currently, LG Twins are only 3 games behind the SSG Landers from that top spot. And of course, if you win that top spot, you win the pennant and you get an automatic berth into the Korean Series. So since August 1st, LG has been 21-10. In that time, the SSG Landers are only 17-16. So I personally believe that LG has what it takes to make it the pennant race interesting in these final few weeks of the regular season. It also helps that LG has 4 more games to go to play due to the rainouts and canceled games. So those 4 games could be huge in making up that difference between the automatic Korean Series appearance or having to play in the semifinals.
Right, and now we know that we don't know the champions, but we know that SSG Landers will probably make it to the postseason. Now, they boast a number of former major leaguers in their lineup. Who do you think fans should really pay attention to that may be flying under the radar?
Sure. Well, SSG, like you said, has a star-filled lineup, anywhere from Kim Kwang-hyun to, guys like Wilmer Font, who's been lights out for the Landers this season. He opened the season with a complete game shutout, which it just helped him, and he went on and has been very successful for them. And in fact, some of their midseason foreign player replacements that have joined them during this summer, such as Juan Lagares and Sean Morimondo, have done incredible for them. And it's very hard to join the team in the middle of the summer and just start plugging away and do really well. So those 2 have done really well. And then 2 other players that I like to refer to as the Choi boys, Chae Jung and Chae Ji-hoon. They have done very well for the Landers. Chae Jung he's a veteran. He's a perennial all-star every year, and he's doing the same thing this year. And then the youngster Chae Ji-hoon has really come on this season, not only at the plate, but also in the outfield. And him teaming up with Juan Lagares, they make a great outfield, and their defense is really going to help them in the playoffs this fall.
Now let's focus on the baseball legend, Oh Ji-hwan. Now, he's the captain of the Twins, of course, and he's enjoying a 2020 season right now. But whether he's going to be able to really continue this into the playoffs, what do you reckon, Dan?
Well, I don't know what Oh Ji-hwan did this past offseason, but whatever he did, he needs to patent it and sell it to everybody because he's having an incredible 2022 season. He's having a career year at the plate, and I believe he's one of the reasons why LG is currently fighting with SSG for that first place. Not only has he done hit home runs, hit 20 home runs. He's also playing incredible defense like he always does. In last night's game, he made this spectacular over-the-head catch, and he just makes it look so easy. So if O keeps up his pace of play that he's doing right now, he's going to become a very big part of that playoffs for the LG Twins.
Right, and now a lot of international fans might know this, but Yasiel Puig and the Heroes, right? It's his first season, and it took half a season, but it seems like he's getting the hang of the KBO. How much has he contributed to his team maybe reaching the playoffs?
The signing of Yasiel Puig, like you mentioned, was the headline of the offseason for the KBO. It took him a little while, but since July, Yasiel Puig has gotten together, and he's hitting about 328 since then. He's maybe not hitting as many home runs as some fans maybe expected, but he plays at the Kojak Skydome, which is very large. But at the same time, he may not have been hitting as many home runs, but he's also saving a few runs with some of his laser throws home and getting people out at home. So if Puig can continue this upward trend of hitting and getting better at the plate, I think this is going to make the Heroes a tough out in the playoffs.
Well, you've got us all pumped up and excited about the postseason now, Dan, and we'll be keeping up with your with you on MyKBO. And well, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
That wraps up the first half of New Day at Arirang, but we have more stories for you after the break and an in-depth discussion on one of my favorite topics, Korean food.
That's right. We discuss how Korean food, or K-food, has become an everyday menu option in the world's largest cities. So stay tuned for all of that coming up in the second half. We'll be right back.
South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduced a Korean new day. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
I feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Forever.
Welcome back to New Day at Arirang. South Korea reported 50,151 new cases of COVID-19 as of 9 p.m. Thursday. That's nearly 20,000 cases fewer than the same period the day before.
However, with cases of the seasonal flu on the rise, authorities have announced a flu vaccination plan for those most at risk. Shin Yeon has the latest.
South Korea is still seeing tens of thousands of new COVID-19 cases each day. On Thursday, the country reported 71,471 new infections. Though this was a drop of more than 22,000 from a day earlier, authorities are still on high alert, mainly because the threat of a flu is re-emerging for the first time in 2 years. We've seen the highest flu count in September since 2018. For the past few years, only 1 out of 1,000 people went to see a doctor for the flu. Now, this number has jumped to 5 out of 1,000. That's why the government held a briefing on Thursday and shared its plans on how to fight off the flu. Officials stressed that though the situation is concerning, the country has know-how on treating influenza.
Because we've seen influenza every year, we have appropriate vaccines and treatments against it. So don't worry too much. Instead, we ask everyone to go get their vaccine shot when it's their turn.
Those at high risk will be able to get flu shots free of charge starting next Wednesday. The first in line will be infants who are at least 6 months old and children up to age 13 who've never had an influenza vaccine shot before. This group is being asked to receive 2 jabs. After them, pregnant women and seniors aged 65 and older will be eligible for their flu shot. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
The bivalent COVID-19 vaccine by Moderna that's specifically tailored to target both the original COVID-19 strain and the Omicron variant has arrived in South Korea. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, around 800,000 doses arrived in the country on Thursday. With another batch scheduled to arrive on Saturday, South Korea is set to receive more than 1.6 million doses in total. Studies have shown that the vaccine generates a higher level of antibody response against the Omicron variant compared with the original. Authorities say that vaccinations will begin sometime in October. It's currently being used as a booster shot in countries of the European Union, the UK, Switzerland and Australia.
Cheongsan Arirang, a festival dedicated to the Korean traditional song of the same name, is the oldest of its kind. And for the first time since the start of the pandemic, it's back. Our very own Kim Jung-sil was there and filed this report from Cheongsan-gun County in Korea's eastern Gangwon-do province.
Cheongseon Arirang Festival doesn't start until a memorial service for 7 scholars has taken place. The scholars from the Goryeo dynasty are known to be the writers of a poem that later became the lyrics of the Korean folk song Arirang. For the very first time this year, though, some 70 descendants of the scholars joined the memorial to commemorate their ancestors. Arirang, inscribed on the UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage, is thought to be their way of expressing love and sorrow. Local residents and visitors from the neighboring cities all welcomed the festival's return.
I love it. I hope older people who went through tough times during the pandemic will come and enjoy the festival.
I am from Cheongseon myself, so I carry a sense of pride about Cheongseon Arirang. I hope more people will take interest and recognize the song in the future.
The 47th edition of the festival celebrated its opening night with many exciting performances. As you can see behind me, thousands have gathered on this opening night to enjoy the various renditions of Cheongseon Arirang after a 2-year hiatus due to the pandemic. The highlight of the opening ceremony, Kim Nam-gi's masterful performance of the tune. He's the oldest man alive to have sung the original version of Cheongseon Arirang and also performed at the opening of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics.
Younger people should come so that Arirang can be passed on to the next generation. If the few remaining singers of this song quit, the whole culture may disappear. There are many young people here. I hope that they will sing along Arirang and continue the tradition in the future.
Other masters of Cheongseon Arirang will perform throughout the festival, which runs until Sunday. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News, Cheongseon.
It's time for Global Insight. K-food or Korean food has become a global brand, from bulgogi and rice bowls topped with multicolored veggies and proteins to Korean takes on cream-based dishes and snack foods like hot dogs. K-food comprises not only Korean cuisine, but surprising combinations of vibrant flavors and chromatic ingredients in both traditional and fusion dishes. But the trend is going beyond the novelty factors for foodies. K-food is now expanding as an everyday option for global city dwellers, as some of the most popular Korean foods are becoming mainstream in the world's largest cities. We take a look at this phenomenon with Carl Eugene Kim, resident of Toronto, working as a contract and procurement specialist at the Minto Group. We also have Christine Yakub, MBA and marketing manager at Myeonglang America, which launched Korean hot dogs in the US market. Very warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. And well, my first question to you, Kyle. It's lovely to see you, and I hear that Toronto is one of the best places in North America to try diverse Korean food. So where's really the go-to spot in the city?
Yes. Toronto is indeed a great city to try Korean cuisine, as well as many other eateries from all over the world. In fact, it's a city where more than half of the population is from outside of Canada, outside of the country by birthplace. And more than half of the Korean population in Canada resides in Greater Toronto area. So I would say definitely, along with Los Angeles, Toronto has the most sophisticated diversity when it comes to Korean food, and well, really when it comes to everything. More specifically in Toronto, I would say definitely North York area, a northern part of the city of Toronto, that has the most Korean population in Canada, is the go-to spot for everyone. It's also called the New Koreatown, and the old one, of course, is down in the downtown-y area, where there's also a plethora of Korean eateries you can choose from. So yeah, I would definitely recommend North York area.
And while California, of course, is rich in diversity too, bringing you into the conversation, Christine. Now, Myeonglang hot dog, it's been spotlighted as one of California's hottest street food trends, and it's quite surprising, really, as some of the ingredients in your product are a little unorthodox for the American consumer, of course. So what was really the initial reaction to ingredients like black squid ink?
The concept of Korean hot dog is not so much different from Western culture's corn dog, like batter sausage with a stick. The differentiation point is the ingredient to draw the customer's attention. We introduce rice-containing batter, which gives chewy texture. We also introduce mozzarella cheese instead of sausage inside, and decorate it with diced potatoes or sweet potatoes. The good thing about this new trial is that the Americans are already familiar with these ingredients. All these ingredients created the new concept as a Korean hot dog. Myeongrang hot dog added more to this new concept by adding different seasonings and the sauces in addition to traditional ketchup or mustard. The black squid ink hot dog, yes, we know it could be a very unusual ingredient for many people, but the shape of the hot dog itself, which mimics the squid legs, and somewhat exotic squid ink containing batter is enough to draw the attention as a fun trial and experience. Because of this reason, this black squid ink hot dog is very popular among kids.
Right, it's definitely a statement menu, but it appeals widely. The taste of it really appeals to a big crowd, I suppose. And well, Kyle, you actually moved to Toronto 2 years ago, and well, during that time, have you noticed a growing appetite for Korean food there?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I would say some Korean restaurants have more non-Korean patrons than the Korean ones. So if you walk into any Korean restaurant in North York, say, chances are you would easily see a lot of non-Koreans, even quite a lot of non-Asians, Caucasians enjoying the traditional Korean staples. For example, you would easily bump into a Caucasian devouring meat from his gamjatang pork bun soup with a can of Molson, which is a Canadian beer, or a mix of different ethnicities sitting at one table enjoying pork belly barbecue, samgyeopsal barbecue with 1,000 Korean side dishes that come with any entree for free. So I would say as a Korean, it's definitely nice, but it's surreal as well. And I gather this is in part because dining out here is rather expensive. You would pay well over $20, 20 Canadian dollars for a proper meal in a Korean restaurant and other restaurants as well. And we Koreans, we can kind of whip it up at home, hence more non-Korean patrons. And what I personally define Korean food as the spicy, sweet, and tender, I really believe it really appeals to non-Koreans.
Well, it's quite surprising what you said, especially about the gamjatang or potato and rib stew, because it comes with, very strong flavors that might be quite exotic for non-Koreans. And, well, it does seem, Carl, that in many cities, Korean food is becoming more appreciated in its authentic form than rather adapting to the localized sort of flavors. Would you agree with this?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's this thing that Korean food becoming more appreciated in its authentic form. That's also the same thing I say to everyone here when it comes to Korean culture as well. So when current K-pop stars, BTS, Blackpink, you name it, and many more, when they rose to international fame for the first time, I really believe it's their authenticity, that is who they really are, that earned them the charm of originality, which then touched a lot of fans' hearts. So to elaborate, they didn't try really hard to become like Americans. They didn't try hard to fit in at the risk of losing themselves. All they did, they just tried to communicate their true selves with the world, sometimes with poor English, sometimes with perfect, impeccable English. But what they did was really, they presented themselves as they are, who they really are. And that, Soo-young, I believe, it's what did all the magic. And same with Korean food. It's always been there. It's always good. It's always been good. It's always had the potential to be liked as much, but it wasn't really much introduced before and wasn't really presented as is. And that it's that's really the charm of Korean food, appealing to locals here.
Right. And Christine, well, what made your company really jump into the US market? I mean, how did you build your brand?
Well, we knew that Myeongrang hot dog has been very, very popular in Korea. And as we analyzed the U.S. market, there were not many Korean food brands that American people could enjoy in daily life with an easy access. As we all know, there are numerous street foods in Korea, which Koreans can enjoy in their usual life. But here in the United States, we were very limited by having only pastries or donuts. This is how we started thinking of bringing this brand from Korea and try the market. We contacted Myeongrang in Korea and ended up having master franchise agreement to use their brand name. Our strategy was to start as a franchise business to fully adapt in US market. The customer's response was more than what we expected. This new fancy looking hot dogs attracted all generations and ethnicity. Consistent flavor and the customer service is the foundation of our brand. This gave us the opportunities to be mentioned in LA Times, AAA magazines, and local newspapers. Myeongrang hot dog is slowly establishing its foundation to be an example of successful localization of Korean food brand. We also use social media as a marketing tool to be more approachable in public.
I see. And Christine, well, Myeongrang hot dog, as you said, it's definitely come a very long way from the first store that opened in Busan, South Korea's southern coastal city years ago, and now it's expanding into the United Kingdom as well. So what is uniquely Korean about Myeongrang hot dogs that makes it different from the usual hot dogs that come to mind and the slight adaptations we see of it?
Well, Myeongrang hot dog is the original brand, which tried the different ingredients than the traditional sausage-based corn dog. Even though the Myeongrang hot dog has been very popular in Korea for a while, it was not very easy for us to bring it to the United States because of the different and very strict franchise regulations. The process of franchise business registration is very different from states to states. This is a reason why we're slow and careful on expanding our business in many states, because we want to be compliant and in different states. To accomplish more effective and attractive business, we're pursuing the differentiation and standardization strategy in our menu and operation. We all know what to expect when we walk into McDonald's, right? The same concept here. We want our customers to have the same expectation when they walk into the different stores and different locations. This requires a lot of effort, such as standardized training program for franchisees and building the trust between the corporate and franchisees. We want to use these process and operation strategies to build a unique Korean hot dog brand, which no one can easily copy.
Right, looks like it takes a combination of more than just flavors there. It takes a lot of strategizing as well. And well, Kyle, what do you think it is about Korean food that appeals to a population as diverse as in Toronto?
Right. I would first say, like, rather than the specific gastronomical traits of Korean food having contributed to the popularity, but first I would have to say I believe, as many other witnesses do as well, that heightened awareness of Korean culture in general, I think it really appealed to folks first. For example, Korean series on Netflix, YouTube, etc., and many other platforms, and that seems to have opened the portal, sort of, to the world of Korean food. So just like Korean pop, it's always been good, it's been there, but it wasn't as much introduced. That said, gastronomically speaking, I would define the personality of Korean food as sweet, spicy, and tender, as I briefly mentioned before. That really is the personality and the charm of K-food, I guess, something very peculiar about Korean food. It's not just super spicy like Indian or Latin American food. No offense to Indians or Latin Americans, but your food is really, really hot and spicy. But Korean food, it can be also super spicy, but then it's also sweet and tender at the same time. That's really the charm of Korean food, I believe. Like Japanese food, sweet and tender like Japanese food. So, and on top of that, contrary to popular belief in Korea among Koreans, there is a surprising number of people who can really do spicy. I would say some cultures are even more accustomed to stronger spices, so there's that. And to that, you can add the universally beloved sweetness, sweet and tender, to that spiciness, and that's a perfect K-food that everyone is just destined to crave.
Sweet, spicy and tender, I like it. It really sort of defines the Korean spirit as well, really. And well, Christine, what's surprising about Myeongnam hot dog with your product is that you are actually able to sell this product to Americans who arguably invented the hot dog. So what was it about Korean hot dogs or corn dogs that really widely appealed to US foodies?
Well, I think it stemmed from the curiosity of the K culture. We all know Korean drama, music, and the fashion are very popular all around the world, especially in the United States. People started embracing the Korean culture and started having interest on different aspects of Korean culture, including food. Like I mentioned before, the concept of corn dog is not so much different from battered sausage with a stick. We upgraded this traditional version of corn dog by adding a variety of flavors using different rice-based chewy batter and cheeses. Hot dog decorated with diced potatoes and sweet potatoes with different seasoning and sauces, providing the option to choose to be more unique and personalized for the customer's taste preference. This differentiation from the traditional plain corn dog attracted people in the United States.
And which flavors would you say are the most popular? I mean, do preferences differ by region or demographics in the US?
I would say the cheese-based hot dogs with or without potatoes are the most popular menu in Myeongnam hot dog. With the reasonable price, the customers can enjoy both cheese, sausage, crunch, potatoes at the same time from our hot dog. I don't believe there's any difference on preference by any region or demographics.
So yeah, a real Korean twist to the very widely loved snack foods such as hot dogs. And now, Kyle, before we finish this interview, as a travel blogger and foodie, what are some top K foods that you'd like to recommend for anyone visiting Canada?
Oh, I would be too nice in 3 days to really introduce everyone to the world of Korean food, but I just don't want to take too much of your time. And I was really actually quite shocked to find that I forgot to mention Korean hot dog. Shame on me, but yeah, of course we have like different Korean brands, hot dog brands here, which is enjoying record high popularity here. And what I also wanted to recommend was Korean chicken, definitely. I have received 1 million testimonies of Korean chicken becoming their new staple, especially from a lot of Westerners. So yeah, like I said, it's basically hot and spicy, like your usual KFC or Popeyes, but it's not too salty, but rather on the sweeter side, and the meat is just delectably tender. I would say it's the epitome of sweet, spicy, and tender that I keep saying that no one can really resist. And also, lastly, if you feel like going more spicy, you would definitely try gamjatang, pork bone soup. It's also the epitome of Korean sweet, spicy, and tender. Intact pork meat with bones still attached to the meat. It's soaked in the reddish brown broth that's basically spicy but sweet as well. You can eat it with your hands, rib style, along with pieces of gakdugi, sliced radish kimchi, and thousands of other side dishes that come with any entree free of charge. So I would say definitely Korean hot dog, Korean chicken, and gamjatang.
Right, well, I think my mouth is watering just thinking about all this K-food, but yes, it's definitely sweet, spicy, tender. It's delicious. So, well, I'm afraid though this is where we're going to have to end the interview today. That was Carl Eugene Kim, resident of Toronto, and Christine Yakub at Myeongnam America joining us this morning. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
Hi Matt, let's start with a look at the United Nations tribute to Queen Elizabeth II.
Well, that's right. Following the passing of the UK's longest reigning monarch, the 193-member body observed a minute of silence to pay their respects. Now, it was followed by a speech given by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who had this to say about the Queen.
The sun is set on a most extraordinary reign. We are here today to pay tribute to the memory of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Britain's longest reigning monarch. Queen Elizabeth was a pillar without peer on the world stage for more than 70 years.
Now, the Queen died at the age of 96 on September 9th at her Scottish royal estate at Balmoral Castle. Her body is currently lying in state in London's Westminster Hall until the morning of September 19th. The funeral is set for the same day at Westminster Abbey. Now, in a row of immigration, the U.S. state of Texas has sent 2 buses of undocumented migrants to the residence of U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris in Washington, D.C. The buses arrived at the VP's residence on Thursday local time, surprising volunteers who were expecting the migrants at Union Station, 6 kilometers away. Now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, refuting a claim by Harris that the U.S. border is secure, said the buses were intentionally sent to Harris's backyard. Now, this comes just a day after Florida sent 50 migrants by plane to the resort island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. The developments are part of escalatory moves from Republican states to ship migrants to so-called sanctuary states, which protect undocumented immigrants from deportation or prosecution. Now, the world's second largest cryptocurrency, Ethereum, has just completed an upgrade with its long-anticipated merge, taking effect on Thursday. The upgrade will see the coin reduce its carbon emissions by over 99%. This is because it no longer requires an energy-intensive proof-of-work mining process, instead using a proof-of-stake system, which allows users to stake their own tokens to validate transactions. Now, before the upgrade, the energy used to mine Ethereum matched Austria's electricity consumption at 72 terawatt-hours per year. And in our final story, tennis legend Roger Federer has announced his retirement after a remarkable 24-year-long career. The 41-year-old Swiss player posted on social media on Thursday that he will retire from competitive tennis after this week's Laver Cup in London. Federer is widely regarded as one of the world's best players with 20 Grand Slams to his name. He holds the world record for 237 consecutive weeks as world number 1. Now, his announcement comes after struggling for 2 years with a knee injury. Federer mentioned that he still plans to play tennis in the future, but not at major tournaments.
Good morning. I'm Ijian with the latest weather updates. Well, as Typhoon Muifa travels along the east coast of China, wet clouds have formed in the West Sea, dropping rain in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do, the west coast of Jeollanam-do, and Jeju Island this morning. And those in Gyeonggi-do province could see more than 60 millimeters of rainfall, while the capital and Jeju can expect 5 to 40 millimeters today. Meanwhile, south of inland regions could see light passing rain. Now, cloudy skies will be a feature for most parts of the country, along with strong winds, while morning temperatures are 3 to 5 degrees higher than seasonal averages. Now, west of Korea will see highs that are above 30 degrees Celsius again. So Gwangju will be topping out at 31 degrees Celsius. Seoul and Daegu will be at 29 degrees this afternoon, so warm and humid air will dominate most areas today. Now, giving you an update on Typhoon Nammador, the large storm is forecast to make a landfall in northern Kyushu next Monday, affecting eastern and northern Japan from Saturday through Monday. So Korea's Jeju and Gyeongsang-do provinces could feel the indirect effect on Sunday into Monday. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions. around the globe.
Now that wraps up this hour's newscast, but keep in mind that when we come back next week, New Day at Arirang will start an hour later at 9 a.m.
This actually marks the last episode of New Day at Arirang, which means Toyeon and I will no longer be presenting the news together from next week. So it's a very sad time, but he'll be back by himself at 9 a.m. Korea time from Monday, I'll be following with Global Insight around 9:30. Thank you for being with us all this time. You've been brilliant. Have a wonderful weekend wherever you are. Goodbye.